Hi, it's Karolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this adorable Minnie Mouse cake. And I have my cakes already baked, filled, iced, and they are in the refrigerator waiting to be decorated. And I have videos showing you how to do all of that. And I will link them in the description. And all of the tools that I use and any other videos that I reference will be linked down below as well. So let's get started. I have Gumtex powder, Tylose powder, CMC powder. It's all basically the same thing. I knead a little bit into my fondant. I only use marshmallow fondant, and I roll it out and I let it sit for like 15 to 20 minutes before I start using it. It's going to stiffen the fondant up and make it so much easier to work with. I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board so it doesn't slide around, an X-Acto knife with a wet paper towel, a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water, and I printed this out the size that I wanted it to be. I will link that picture in the description, and I'm doing my trace, cut, and smooth method to make these decorations. So I want to take my Dresden tool and trace this onto this black fondant, and I need to look past that bow because I'm going to put a bow on top, so I'm just kind of continuing the line down and back up, and then I can peel that back, and I am going to cut a shallow cut first because this is rolled out about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. So anytime I cut anything out of thick fondant, I always make a shallow cut first so I have a guideline to use. And then once that shallow cut is done, I stick the tip all the way down to the cutting board and cut this out. That way I'm not going to mess up the fondant as I cut it out. And anytime I cut anything out of fondant, do you see how jagged it is? You need to take your time, take your fingers and your tools to smooth the cut. So I'm pressing the fondant back down on itself, and you just need to make it look nice and pretty. So I'm flipping it over, using my fingers to smooth out the edges, and then I'll flip it over so it's right side up and smooth out the edges as well, using my fingers and my tools. Now I have some thinner pink fondant, and I'm going to trace this number 2. So the cake is pink. I don't want to make it red like the picture. So again, I'm tracing it on here, and then I just want to make a note of where some of these polka dots are so I can put them on later. And this is a thinner piece of fondant, so I can stick the tip of the blade all the way down to the cutting board and just cut that out. And again, whenever you cut anything out of fondant, it's going to be jagged. So I need to take my time and use my fingers and my tools to smooth my cuts. And I can realign that back on there, and I want to glue this down. So I'm lifting the edge up and I'm painting some water on the pink part, not down on the black part, and then I'm putting it back down. And then I just want to use the end of my paintbrush just to make sure I have an even border around this entire thing. And now I have a skewer. I wet it, and you want to twist it in here. Don't jab it in. I can't put it in the middle. You'll be able to see it. So I'm shifting it a little over to the right, and you can see how thick I rolled out that black fondant just so I could get this skewer in there without you seeing it. So I'm screwing it in there, making sure it's not poking out the front or the back. And I just want to realign that on top of the picture on a cutting board, and I'm going to set that aside. Now I have a cake box lid. I always cut the lids off of cake boxes and keep them for stuff like this. And I have my ribbon cutter and some thin fondant, and I'm just cutting a bunch of strips out, and then I like to take my fingers and smooth the edges because again, the fondant is always jagged. And then I want to take my rulers and straighten these strips out so they are perfectly straight when I put them on the cake. Now I have some gold ones, and I want to paint them gold. So I have some Rolcom Super Gold, and it's a powder, and I already have some in the cup with a little bit of that lemon extract, and it makes a little paste, if you will. And I'm just painting all of these strips. So I usually need 2 coats whenever I'm painting something gold, so the second coat just makes it a little deeper. And now I'm going to stack the cake. Washing my hands. My hands are always clean when I touch my cakes. I just got that out of the refrigerator. The icing is solid. I'm not going to mess it up. I'm using my little sewing ruler. I will link that below. And I'm measuring how long the straw should be with a marker, and then I get a pair of scissors and I cut that marker off, and I put the straws in the cake, make sure that it's level, get some icing down, and I'm going to stack this. So I have a full stacking tutorial that I will link in the description. It goes into complete detail and shows you how I stack my cakes. That cardboard circle sits atop of the straws so it won't collapse, and I make sure that it's level, dowel it into the cake board so it doesn't shift, and cover that hole with some buttercream. Now I want to get some piping gel. You can use water if you want, and I'm getting piping gel all along the outside of the top tier so I can put these stripes on. So I'm starting in the very back, making sure I'm holding that perfectly vertical. And then I have these offset scissors. I will link them below, and I'm just going to cut the top off, and it was a little crooked, so I'm just making sure that it is straight. And then I'm going to stick these stripes on exactly next to each other. So I'm putting the black next to the pink and cutting off the excess. And then I'm going to do the white next to the black. And you want to make sure that it's straight up and down, that it's not like on a little angle. And then I'm doing the gold. And then once I have that on there, I'm going to repeat the colors the whole way around the cake. So I'm starting with the pink again. And I start in the back. That way, when I end in the back, it doesn't always match up. That almost fits in there, and it's white, so you can't tell that it's not completely filling it. So that ended up working. So I'm using a fondant smoother and just pressing that against the side of the cake. And let's put that back in the fridge. Now I printed out these edible images, and I have videos showing you how I use my edible printer, and I will link that below. I actually got that image on Etsy, and I will link that below as well. And I want to cut this exactly along the edge, and I'm going to put a black fondant border around it. Now if you have a Cricut, it could probably cut it for you. I don't have a Cricut, so I just do it by hand. Flip it upside down, and then I'm getting piping gel all on the back of that image, making sure I get all the way to the edges so the edges stick down. Flip it over on that thin piece of black fondant that I already rolled out. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut an even black border around the entire image. And once I do that, again, I have to take my fingers and my tools and smooth my cut. So I flip it over and smooth it out from the back and then do the same thing from the front. And I want this to dry flat, so I'm just going to leave it out at room temperature on a cutting board and set that aside. Now I'm rolling out the border, so I'm rolling a really long strip, and then I use my ribbon cutter and cut the strip out and my rulers to make sure that it is straight. I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm making the name. So I rolled out this gold fondant and I'm doing my trace, cut, and smooth method again. So I'm tracing these letters onto this gold fondant. Don't forget the inner pieces as well. And then I always cut the inner pieces out first. It's so much easier to cut those small pieces out before you cut the entire letter out. So I cut them out and I just smooth those cuts, and then I will cut the rest of the letter out. And again, once you cut it out, you smooth your cut. So it's trace, cut, smooth, trace, cut, smooth. That's the process that I use to make all of my fondant decorations. And then I realign the letters on top of that picture so they dry to the correct shape. And then I have this bow mold. I will link that below. I'm getting a little bit of Crisco in there. And then I'm going to press some fondant into the mold. And when I take it out, it's going to have a border around it. So I just need to cut that excess fondant off of it. So I'm just putting the knife on an angle and I'm cutting the excess fondant away. And then again, going to smooth my cuts and make it look nice and pretty. And now I have some gold disco dust. I didn't have that much left over, but I made it work. Now, this stuff is not edible, so whenever I use this on a cake, I always let the customer know that they need to remove these pieces first before they cut into the cake. It's not toxic, but it's not edible. I have some water, and I want to get water on all of these pieces. Make sure you don't miss any sections because the water is going to help the disco dust stick to the fondant. And once I have the water on, then I am going to sprinkle it on here. Now, if that container was full, it would be a lot easier to cover all these pieces. So I did order some more after I made this video. I will link it in the description for you. So I'm picking up some of the extra dust with my finger and just pressing it onto that wet fondant, and that water is helping it stick. And then I picked up the bow and I noticed that the sides weren't covered, so I'm just getting some water along the sides, and then I'm going to stick some more of that dust to the sides because that bow is going to go on the topper and you'd be able to see the sides that weren't covered, so I thought it would look a little weird. And then I'm just using my fingers to tap off the excess dust. This stuff kind of gets everywhere, so you want to make sure that you don't have too much on your pieces that it falls off. Now I have an icing bag with the tip number 3, and I'm following that pattern that I pushed onto the number 2 and just putting some white dots all along there. And then anytime you pipe these dots with buttercream, you have to take a wet paintbrush and push in your points because they tend to look a little pointy. It looks a lot better if you push them in. And that looks good. Let's set that aside. I am going to put a white background on the name. So now I have some thin white fondant. I'm going to flip these letters over and get some water on the back and stick them down to this white fondant. And then like I did with that Minnie Mouse picture, I want to cut an even border around here. So I'm just getting really close and making sure that I'm cutting an even border around all of the letters. And do I even have to say it when I remove it? I'm going to take my time and smooth my cuts. And I'm getting a little bit of water behind the bow and I'm sticking that to the number 2. And I don't want the name to dry out, so I'm just going to stick that in a Ziploc bag. Now I got my cake out of the refrigerator and I have some piping gel and I want to take a wet paper towel and just clean the board. And I'm going to start in the back and I got some piping gel down and I'm putting this border on. Where it meets, I'm going to cut it and then press the seam together. And then I'm taking my palette knife and just making sure that that line is even. And now I'm making a bow. So I have a weird way of making bows. I rolled out that black fondant really thin. I'm cutting it in half, align the bottom, and then I'm going to cut either side. And then after that, I want to lift the fondant up to make sure that it's not sticking together and then realign it. And then start on one side. So I'm starting down, go up in the middle, and then come down on the other side. And then lift that up. And I want to take my fingers and just smooth my cuts. And I'm getting a little bit of water on the end, fold it in half, and then go up and down. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other loop. Get some water down, fold it, and then go up and down. And then I just want to cut the excess fondant off in the middle, so just using my X-Acto knife and cutting straight edges. And then I want to cut a long rectangle for the center, and I always fold the edges in. I just feel like it makes it look a little neater if I fold the edges in, get a little bit of water on the back, and I'm sticking a little water in the middle, and then stick half the bow on one side, half the bow on the other side, lift it up, press it down in the middle so it's sticking, and then I want to wrap that excess piece around the back. And there is your little bow. That's my weird way of making bows, but it's effective. And then I am cutting 2 long ribbons and cutting it so it looks like a ribbon, like the little points. You see what I'm doing. So now I want to bring this bow over to the cake and I'm going to open up those loops so it can stand on its own. And again, that has some of that Tyler's powder mixed into it. I'm getting some piping gel along the end, taking a paper towel to remove the excess cornstarch, and then I'm sticking that behind the loop so you can't see where it starts, and I'm just curving it back and forth to give it a little motion, and wherever it's going to touch that bottom border, I'm just getting a little bit of piping gel behind it and pressing that against the side. And again, I'm hiding that behind the loop and just giving it a little motion and getting some piping gel behind it. And I centered that bow to the center of the cake. And just taking a dry paintbrush and removing the excess cornstarch and getting some piping gel behind the bow wherever it's touching the cake and pressing that on there, putting the handle of my paintbrush in the loop to press it against the cake. And that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the fridge for a little bit, and then I got it back out of the fridge. And I want to get toothpicks on either side of the skewer. That way it's not going to twist when I put it into the cake. I'm getting a little bit of piping gel on the bottom and then sticking that down, making sure it's facing forward. And I have a little bit of that pink icing, and I'm just holding this up against the cake to see where it's touching the cake, and I'm getting some of the icing behind it. I probably should have used a paper towel and got rid of some of that excess cornstarch. I might have done that at the end, I don't remember. And then I'm getting the name out of the bag. And same thing, I'm getting a little bit of icing behind each letter, and I'm starting with the X because it's the center, and I'm starting in the center of the cake, and then I build the name out to the left and to the right. That way I can make sure that it's center. Now I used icing. You can use water, you can use piping gel, whatever you want to get it to stick to the cake. And I'm just adjusting the letters and making sure it looks nice and even. And I'm taking a dry paintbrush and just removing any excess icing that's sticking out the sides. And I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I am making the little curlies, so I cut a straight line and then a squiggly line on one side and a squiggly line on the other. So I'm doing that for the white, the black, the pink, and the gold. And then I wrap it around my Dresden tool to get a little curly Q. And I'm doing that, I'm doing a bunch of them in all of the colors. And then I'm making polka dots. So I'm cutting like 6 or 7 polka dots out of each color, and I'm smoothing the edges and setting them down. And I always cut some straight edges on my polka dots. You'll see why when I put them on the cake. And then I have some gold polka dots and gold curlies that I need to paint gold. So again, I have that Rolcom Super Gold mixed with the lemon extract, and I'm painting 2 coats on here. With the curlies, you need to make sure you paint the top and on the insides and everything. That's why I gloved my hand, so I can make sure that it's completely covered in the gold. And I'm doing 2 coats, and let's set that aside. Now I got my cake out of the fridge and we can finish decorating this. I have some piping gel. I'm taking one of those half polka dots and sticking it to the top half of the cake and then to the bottom half. So that's why I cut them in half. I like to do some halvesies and some full polka dots. And I try to not put the same color next to each other, and I work my way to the back, and then I start on the other side and work my way to the back. And now I'm using some piping gel and getting it underneath all of the curlies. And I'm putting these on the top and on the middle and also onto the cake board. And here is the cake. How cute is that? So there you go. How cute is this cake? And I just want to say that the stripes and the polka dots, I do that on a lot of cakes. I'll put some examples over here, but you don't always have to do stripes and polka dots the same. You can do different variations of them. And I just think that it makes the cake look so nice, but it's still a pretty simple design. Now this cake on the inside, the top tier is a 2-layer torted 5-inch. And the bottom tier is a 2-layer torted 7-inch. And I have a video talking about when I tort and when I don't tort my cakes, and I will link that below for you. And it feeds about 25 to 30 people. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I do have a KakeAcademy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. I will link all that information in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you could check out my website. And if you want to see another Minnie and Mickey cake, you can watch this video next, and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.